Hello and welcome to another edition of Rick and Bubba University, the podcast. Bubba and I are so excited that you have joined us as we continue to, do our part in this new world, Bubba, of podcast. I mean, if you
content.
Look, if you ain't got a podcast now, you ain't nothing.
Content, Rick. People need more content.
We need more content.
When 5 hours a day is just not enough, there's Rick and Bubba University.
There you go. Now, this is a topic over the years, and honestly, because I've never had to deal with it with any of my children, I'm not saying I'm proud of this, but many times on our show when this Common Core argument breaks out and people talking about those that are for Common Core, those that are against Common Core, and Common Core this and Common Core that, I've never had a child that was that was in a school at the time when Common Core was existing. So in all fairness, I didn't really pay that much attention to it. I have family members who are teachers. I've heard them discuss it a little bit. And so we decided to take a podcast and talk about it because there's 43 states right now in the United States of America that have adopted Common Core. There's a number of states where this is coming up for a vote or there's a chance for you to have a say in it. So what we're going to try to do today is to be educated on this whole Common Core debate that is going on with our country. And one of the people that's been speaking about this nationally is Joan Landis, and Joan joins us for her guest appearance and debut on Rick and Bubba University, the podcast. Joan, welcome to RBU.
Awesome. We're just glad to be together. Let's talk.
All right, so let's jump in. Now, you are a licensed clinical mental health counselor, and we can get into what your profession is, but besides all this, you and your husband actually have 7 children, and I love what it says in your bio.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations on that. Thank you. And you homeschooled your children, and about half the time, I guess it would have taken for them to earn the same diplomas in any of our government schools or even a private school. And you guys homeschooled them, and you found in this process, you developed one of the things we've said on our show for many years, that we think the classroom format that the government schools implement, it's really a form of education designed for girls.
I call it confinement schooling. And it really isn't natural, it really doesn't meet the needs of kids, especially our warrior boys. It's very, very tough for them. And so, I've been a consultant for a new school called Breakout School that absolutely breaks out of the paradigms that the industrial complex of education has kind of force fed us. And that school, probably 70-80% of the time, those boys are in the outdoors and outside, and the results have been phenomenal. So that's just that's an example of how Common Core gets us thinking inside this box and arguing about this box. And I think it's really important for us to say, we've got to think out of the box. What is the best for these boys? What are the best for these girls? And because we know the suicide rates are through the roof. They are through the roof. And what we're doing now is not working. So we really need to put everything on the table and say, really, Common Core, is that really what's going to be best? What we found with this school is that these boys were extremely discouraged with these arbitrary standards, right? Common Core standards. Very discouraged. They had ADHD, they have anxiety. One of them had to have his mother come and sit with him in math class for 2 years every day. And he would literally tear his hair out, have tantrums, right? Because it was so not friendly to a lot of the ways that kids learn. He got into this breakout school where they work with horses and they're outside, and it's very small. It's like 6 kids with 1 adult male. And it's crazy. He's gone from 3rd grade math to pre-algebra in 1 year. So it's, and plus his mental health, he's happier, more stable. So what I'm saying is, yes, Common Core is definitely something we need to discuss, but even bigger than that is local control, choices, things like that.
Yeah. So let's talk about Common Core. Just the mention of it gets everybody's dander up. What exactly is that? And I understand, Joan, that people want a standard that they can compare A and B. You know, this state's doing good, this state's not. This school, I mean, I understand that concept. It sounds like you're giving grades out. But why is it so controversial with so many people?
Well, because it's top-down management. It's coming from the feds. This is not locally generated. There's some window dressing to make it look like it is, but it's not. And we know that anytime that we have a big federal bureaucracy dictating to families what they must do with their children, you inherently have problems because it simply cannot fit the individual needs of individual families. Not only that, but it becomes very political, right? Anything that happens in Washington, D.C. that has that much impact, people are going to fight tooth and nail. But the way that the founders really looked at education was that it should be every township should have their school, and it should be very locally controlled. The teachers should board with the parents of the students. I mean, that's the one-room schoolhouse actually was genius. But now what we have is what Bill Gates is actually on videotape saying, what we need to do is standardize things, standardize the education for kids, and even the implication is standardize kids so that they're like a plug that fits in the right outlet. And that is just, that's terrible.
Yeah,
you feel that.
Yeah, you look at it, the sell on Common Core was just what you said, Bubba, and what you're talking about, Joan, is they were trying to prepare students. They said this would actually prepare them better for college. You said, Bubba, and you're right. This would give us a better indication of how we're doing as a nation. It would catch us up to the rest of the world. But as you and many others are pointing out, but it's flawed because, number one, Bubba and I have talked about this. I think when you try to take the American culture and you try to adapt it to other world cultures, you're already making a mistake because Americans, that's the innovators of the world. They're the ones that have made all these great inventions. And if you take American children and you try to make them more robotic and all, as you said, one size fits all, we lose that entrepreneurial and innovative, spirit of invention and exploration. And it seems to be designed to damper that as well. What's your comment on that?
Well, and that's exactly what Dave Wozniak said. So that was Steve Jobs' sidekick. He went to Singapore and looked at the education there. And he's like, wow, everything is so standardized. Same this, same this, same this. No innovation. You can't think out of the box. You can't be creative. And if you think about the number of patents per capita in the United States versus China, who has a very, very, very regimented system, it's not even close. Okay. And the interesting thing is that if you have somebody in some government bureaucracy that says your child should learn this, guess what? Our technology is working. It's moving so fast that it may be that in 5, maybe even less years than that particular piece of knowledge is not even necessary anymore. That job, that career that they started preparing for in 8th grade may not even exist. And so to me, the best thing is to have local control. Parents are the resident experts of their children. They know their children the very best. They know what they want. And that's the very best. When you have these thousands of laboratories, what's working best for you, what's working best for you, and not try to standardize. But as people learn from each other and say, whoa, you guys have an outdoor school in your state? How cool is that, right? Common Core would never allow for that. And yet the results are crazily cool. And so for me, the idea to even have, here, listen, I was talking to a wonderful expert on schooling and kids, and she said, I think we ought to get rid of the standards altogether. And I'm like, whoa, that's radical. And she says, no, because the problem is you teach and test to the standard. You're trying to jam that kid into the standard. Every kid is different. And when we saw the results of this other school without adhering to those types of standards, when they worked for their personal record, okay, they're doing their personal best. Those kids didn't just arbitrarily meet some arbitrary standard. They went past it. Okay. So I really want to say to you that the excellence really can be there. We didn't have anything like national standards in the 40s and 30s. And people remember, maybe you're not old enough, but remember going to the store and no one had a cashier machine. And those guys were just, they could add so fast, but we don't have that capacity anymore. So really having standards doesn't help the learning.
All right, we'll come back. We're going to continue this conversation with Joan Landis, talking about standardizing our government education. 43 states have adopted Common Core, and is it time for us to start looking at this model? It's not really anything new, but maybe to take it back to how it was originally intended with our founders. When our conversation continues on Rick and Bubba University, the podcast. All right, we're talking with Joan Landis, and she is has done some out-of-the-box thinking about education. She and her husband homeschooled 7 children. We'll talk more about that and the game plan that they put together and their results. We're locking on Common Core right now. And Joan, it seems to be that you're kind of in line with what we've talked about on the show a lot. When we allowed the Department of Education to be created in this country, that was a huge mistake. Because, as you said, the founders never intended the federal government to be involved in the education of children. And then we allowed the Department of Education to be created. And Bubba, as we've said on the air many times, they were just like, we're just here for funding.
Just an umbrella group. They weren't even going to do that to begin with.
We're just here. We're not going to get involved in curriculum.
We're help the local folks out.
We're just here to help. And then before you know it, they start sending the government school money. And then when you say, well, we like that money, they say, oh, well, if you like the money, then we have a say.
Yeah, dance to the song we're singing.
And
here's your check.
And this is probably the biggest, do you think the biggest federal reach so far, and that is this indoctrination of the Common Core? We want everybody on the same standard. This came straight from the federal government, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it's the camel's nose in the tent, okay? Because it started out with just academic standards. Oh, we're just going to do math and reading. And then, history. So that becomes very controversial. How do you teach history, right? So I have one little caboose daughter at home, and on her online class, so she does a couple online classes that she's finishing up. It had on there a picture of the framers of the Constitution, that classic painting where, they're all standing there looking really noble. And it said, please discuss the motives of these signers of the Declaration of Independence, and especially regard their gender, their SES, their gender and their SES. And I don't think they said religion. But the question was, we want you to view these founders through BLM type of lens,
right?
And very woke lens. And she sat there and she went, I'm going to turn this on their head. And so she used the woke logic against them. And she said, you can't tell just from looking on the outside what their gender is, what their SES is, what their race is, what their anything is. We don't even know if they identify as a human species. And for us to do that would be very, very unwoke. And so knowing that they could be anything, this group might be the most diverse group in history. And since they are obviously possibly so diverse, we cannot assail any of their opinions. Boom.
That's great.
I mean, but that she was faced with that kind of question really should enrage parents, because, and here, let me go to another piece. The one reason why Common Core is so bad. Common Core tries to dictate to the teachers and schools how they have to teach and what they have to teach to a great measure. And of course, we have to teach to that, test to that. But one of the problems with this federal overreach is that it makes it so that the teacher is actually quite anxious, okay? Their jobs are on the line, okay? If those kids don't perform at a certain level on those arbitrary tests, then their jobs are on the line. So now the teachers are anxious. And so you get a kid walking in class that is, maybe behind the curve. And that teacher, there's a part of that teacher that wants to help them, but there's a part that's like, you know what? You're going to be a problem as far as how my ratings are. And what it does is it tends to stress that relationship. And we all know the research shows that the best learning happens in a close, attached relationship, whether it's with parents or teachers. It's that idea that says, I don't care what you know until I know that you care. But with all the demands on teachers, all the stakeholders they have to please, all this testing, all of this, having to teach not necessarily what the kids really need, it stresses that relationship. And it's no wonder that kids are acting out more. They're cutting more. They've got more eating disorders, depression, anxiety, right? We never used to see this before. But literally those kids, because of Common Core and because of other things, those schools have become very stressful, almost like a mini concentration camp. They walk in there and their stress goes through the roof. And interestingly, the kids that I was counseling that had a lot of depression, self-harm, eating disorders, suicidality, before COVID, when they went home and didn't have to go into all that, a lot of those actually did a lot better. They were with mom and dad most of the day. They weren't fighting the peer battles. They weren't fighting for acceptance with really, flaky teenagers that one day will like you and hate you the next. And so it really speaks to the big picture, this education system of which Common Core is really a visual part, that it's not meeting the needs of our children. Our children are literally dying, literally. So, yeah.
So, Joan, let me ask you this. I mean, I'm just trying to explore this concept. If you don't test the students or the teachers or the schools in this case, should students be tested in the classroom?
Oh, for sure. Hey, think about what they all did before 1970, okay? Teachers made their own tests. Parents had teacher conferences. I don't think my kid is learning. Okay, let's work on that. But a parent can sense when their kid is wasting their time. And the child can sense when they're getting their time wasted, right? And I'm not saying that you should never have any standardized testing, but it should be optional, kind of like the Iowa Basics. Didn't you grow up with that? Right? The Iowa Basics, national testing, but it tests reading, it tests some basics, but it doesn't say you have to have these woke opinions and you have to, right.
Yeah, so, we had, I think discipline too is a big problem now. Of course, when Rick and I was in school, the discipline was handled by the dad. I mean, I had I had a correction for not paying attention in class. It was called a hot bottom. It helped me to get over it real quick.
Well, and you're speaking to very, very important things. And the interesting thing is most people do not even understand that there is a huge body of research on attachment, okay? If children are not properly attached to their parents and families, they're almost impossible to parent. But a properly attached child is easy to parent. And that it's one of the simplest concepts ever. And so when people are talking about putting kids in pre-K, taking them away from their parents early on, putting them in these institutionalizing them in government situations, I'm like, this is against the research, right? We wouldn't even take a puppy away from its mother too early. We understand that. And yet we're thinking, let's throw these little kids in these big government institutions for major parts of their life. And then we're surprised when they don't attach to their family and they have to attach to their peers and their anxiety goes through the roof because peers are so unstable, right? So I love, Bubba, I love what you said. The connection with your father, that expectation, that attachment with your father was one of the biggest motivations besides his, saying, hey, you stay in line, right?
Right.
But you're attached to him. If you weren't attached to him, you wouldn't care. You're like, so what? You paddle me. I don't care. I'm gonna go out with my gang, right? Yeah. But you did care about him. So you were much easier to parent, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I like to think so.
Yeah, well, yeah.
It didn't take but one or two, and I kind of understood the concept.
No, well, we understood. We also
sit there and get it right.
Yeah, and we were taught, something that has to be taught, and that is consequences, for behavior. And you cannot learn in an environment where authority is not established. And it also teaches you the respect for authority. And of course, ultimately, I think most of this, from a spiritual standpoint, is we're turning children away from authority to the point that ultimately they reject God, the ultimate authority. And there's an agenda on this moving to a secular, godless society, and we're seeing that.
Right, because a godless society is very easy to manipulate. If you're basically a materialistic society without any existential answers to life, death, and suffering, you're so easy to manipulate. All I have to do is say, hey, I'm going to take away your welfare check. And you're like, okay, what do you want? Right? But religious people are very hard to manipulate. We're like, so what if I die? I've got a great afterlife, right?
Yeah.
Or, so what if you take away my check? I've got a congregation that's behind my back, right?
Right.
And so yeah, they don't like religion. They want to separate children from religion and from their parents. It's a very strategic thing, and the results are devastating. They're just devastating.
We're talking to Joan Landis, and we'll come back and we'll continue. We're talking about Common Core, but we're also talking about, are there new innovative ideas on getting a better result when it comes to educating our children? And she and her husband have looked into this, and it's going to be interesting to hear the results when we come back on Rick and Bubba University, the podcast. Bubba, I mean, when you say the word Gabby, people are like, Gabby, what is this? Look, get a better insurance. GABI is what we're talking about. What does that mean? Well, it means that Gabby has provided a way for you and for me and for anybody that is watching this or listening to this. You can find out whether you are paying too much for your homeowner's insurance and for your automobile. I'm guilty of this. I didn't put a lot of research into it. I just was trying to get this done, for you to get a mortgage, and I was trying to get this done if you've ever financed a vehicle. And that's not really wise if you want to be a good steward of what you have. And Gabby makes this easy without it costing you anything or any obligation of any kind. You want to see a true comparison with real rates from all the other insurance companies. I'm talking about apples to apples of your current coverage. They'll put 40 of the top insurance providers, Progressive, Nationwide, Travelers, all the big names. They'll come up. You just enter a little bit of information. Here's what I pay for my automobile insurance for this coverage. Here's what I pay for this coverage for my homeowners. They pull up 40 other insurance companies and say, this is what they would charge you. The savings on average, $961 a year. That's the average. And then, you look at that kind of savings, and you think to yourself, yeah, I could use another $1,000 a year, and then you simply switch to another company. So put your policy to test like we did. Get a better insurance with Gabby, Gabi, totally free to check, no obligation. Go to Gabi.com/RickBubba. That's GABI.com/RickBubba, Gabi.com/RickBubba. Rick and Bubba University, the podcast continues. We're talking with Joan Landis. And, Joan, we talked about Common Core. We've talked about some of the things we've heard on the program for years about the dangers of government education, because the reason why the founders were trying so hard to limit government, because they knew any time you give the government power, every single time, whatever you give them, they'll always abuse it. It's
just human nature.
So minimize what you give them. And we decided to give them education. But if our audience is any indication, I think people have a limit to what they will tolerate. And a lot of people are leaving the government schools for either a private faith-based school or they're leaving for homeschooling options that are out there. And those are becoming more and more prominent. And because it seems like anytime somebody comes up with a form of education that gets a better result, the government and the unions are the first to go out and squash it and say, well, the charter schools, for instance, the charter schools do a better job. How about this? When we tried to give people vouchers to leave bad school systems and go to better school systems, the left, those that love giant government, always seem to be against that.
Yeah.
And what other conclusion can you come to other than what you're trying to educate people on is what they ultimately want is the full control to indoctrinate your children into whatever agenda they may have.
Right. And not only that, but when Common Core was documented as an abysmal failure, okay, Alabama went clear down to not just 50, but 52, right? After instigating Common Core. And it isn't just Alabama. The scores have gone down across the board. But when that happened and Bill Gates said, well, too bad, so sad, sucks to be you. Okay, he actually did not care very much. Then we realized this is not about learning. This is about data. Oh, When we understood that it was actually about data collection, then everything lined up. Everything made sense. It really was not trying to improve your child's education. It was just getting, literally, some of the programs have 1 million data points on them. So that, I think that was very, very sobering to understand. The other thing that I think a lot of parents don't understand is that when that camel's nose is in the tent, not only do you get the educational standards that are controversial, but now we have comprehensive sexuality, eroticization now. And that's coming straight from the top. And I'll tell you, talk about controversial. Boy, when they teach your kids that, okay, if you've got young kids on, you got to turn down the volume. But when they teach young kids that masturbation, homosexuality, anal sex, and things like that are entirely appropriate, Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah.
We have a problem, but it's being jammed down our throats from the feds because of things like Common Core, because we bought into this federal intervention. So
once the system is set up, then the fuel begins to come into the system for whatever it needs. So let me go back to what you said to begin with. So we're actually looking at the Common Core implementation. We're from Alabama, and I know that there's a lot of people right now there's a big push. You need to contact your representatives and your senators that there's an opportunity to say that Alabama's not going to participate in this anymore. But right. I know, but we're talking about 43 different states. But looking at the 43 states, are we seeing similar results? That I'm the kind of person that says, look, if we try something and we don't get the result we're looking for, then we all have to come to a conclusion that was a failure. And you're saying, is Common Core proving? I know you said in Alabama it's no, but if you look at 43 states, are we getting similar results that this isn't improving the education of the children?
Right. No, the test scores have dropped significantly, okay, in every area. But see, that was not the point. It's not failing at what it wanted to do. We thought it wanted to improve education.
Understood.
That was the story they gave us. It's not. And so that's why they don't care. They just want the control. They want the data points. They want to separate parents from their children. That's one reason they teach that math, where the parents are going, I don't know how to do this. And that's actually a tactic.
Joan, let me back up one step from Common Core. How are you on the No Child Left Behind program? How'd you feel about it?
Well, I think every step was a step in the wrong direction. What really needs to happen is we need to think really big picture, not fiddling with the standards, fiddling with the carrot and the stick for educators. The big picture is the societal success with education and with children will be based on the family. And we need to do everything in education needs to support family functioning. And one of the most important things to do is to really make sure those kids are properly attached. They love mom and dad. Mom and dad know how to express their love, right? And that really is a function of the churches, neighborhoods, family, extended family, right? When you get that one right, the particular school doesn't matter that much. I mean, think of how many kids have come up through just abject poverty, but they make it. Why? They didn't have great schools because they had family behind them. Okay, and so if we build these Taj Mahal schools and spend billions and billions of dollars, and yet the family structure is not there, it won't help. I don't care if it's No Child Left Behind. I don't care if it's Common Core. I don't care. All right. We really need to really get focused on our family and our kids. If you are not focused on your kids, try not to have them. Okay. Because that's one of the most inspiring stories I heard was a brilliant woman who graduated from UC Berkeley. She was in school in Harvard. She got married. She had kids. She wrote this fantastic novel and everybody's like, oh, you've got to publish it. It's freakish. It's amazing. And she goes, no, I'm not going to. And they said, why? And she said, because I'm afraid it would detract from my role as a mother. Now that woman had her priorities right. If you can invest in your children in the first few years of your life, the rest of it is actually not too tough. But if you don't invest in your children, you're like, oh, maybe I've got 10 minutes for you. it won't work. I don't care what expensive schools, what standards. And so I really want to encourage people, if they're upset about this stuff, yes, work on repealing Common Core. Yes, work on getting local control back. Run for your school board, right? Get that local control back. Homeschool, do co-ops, do private schools, anything to get your kid out of that government confinement indoctrination, all right? And along with that, attach to your children, love them, spend time with them, cry with them, laugh with them, because when they're properly attached, they're they're easy to parent. They really are.
So we're going to come back and we'll do the final segment. I got a follow-up question on that, and I want to talk about what you and your husband, the Breakout School.org, and this.
Yeah, how do we learn math outside?
Yeah, and what you're doing, because I do think we do need to think of other ways to do education, because I think we're losing the role of education and what it was supposed to do, and now we think the role of education is to indoctrinate a generation of children into a certain political view or a certain worldview or moral view, when at one time the thing that school was concentrating on is actually educating children so that they could go out and be high-functioning adults. So we'll come back and we'll continue this conversation with Joan Landis when Rick and Bubba University, the podcast, continues. So we're talking with Joan Landis, and we've talked Common Core, and now this last segment of the podcast, we're going to talk a little more about some ideas, some things you and your husband have experimented with that have worked quite well in your own 7 children. But let me ask you this one question before we move on. I 100% agree with what you said about this country is in the shape that it's in because we've allowed the family unit to be destroyed. No doubt about it. However, what do we do with the children that have been born into families that have no desire to connect to their children? They're not going to do the job that they were called to do. They do not take responsibility for their children, and then their kid is dropped off at a government school or was bused there, and they couldn't care less, and they know that's 8 hours. They don't have to fool with them. And then, I mean, what do we do with the children that don't have a family unit that says we're leaving this system and we're going to do it ourselves? We're going to a private school. We're leaving a lot of children in government schools who don't have a choice. So what do we do with them?
I think that's a really, really good question. I think a lot of the answer comes in the extended family. Maybe the parents aren't motivated, but I'll bet you there's a grandma, a grandpa, an aunt, an uncle. Okay. And then the other thing too is, yes, we need to get on school boards. We need to influence what's going on there. We need to, go for good legislation, do what we can. And yet one of the most powerful things we can do is to walk away. And I know with it's somewhere between 10 and 20%, depending on which state, somewhere as far as private schooling and homeschooling. If all of us parents suddenly decided, you know what, we're going to re-enroll in public school, it would overwhelm the system. It would crush the system. I mean, there's a massive amount of pent-up power there. But you do ask a good question. Another thing too is I really think the church needs to step up. Yeah. Churches need to step up and care about these kids and say, you know what, maybe you're stuck in the government school, but can we create an academy in our church? Every church can do that. Yeah. There's no reason. You've got the building, you've got the adults, right? And rescue those kids, rescue them, because it literally is life and death and spiritual life and death. You can tell I'm very passionate about this.
No, you just hit one of the solutions. Another family member is a solution. But I have seen, and I know the church that I attend does this, churches are starting to develop these academies, and they're not just reaching out to the children that do have families. They're saying we're in this community, and we are an option for the child that maybe isn't in the position or a family unit that can do that, and they're taking that role in the child's life. Foster parents are taking the role in a child's life. So let's talk a little bit about breakoutschool.org. I mean, we've talked about Common Core.
How does that work? I mean, how does that really work? If I'm not good at math, how is that gonna look when I go to this format?
Right. And that's the big question. People can't imagine it. It's like, wait, what? But there really is cool research that shows that children learn best or better under a green leafy canopy. And I don't know what that would be. I don't know if it's because for thousands of years that's really where we learned. I don't know. This recent development of being in four walls to learn is it's not natural, right? But and it's a PhD, Dr. Richardson, that I consult for, and he started this school. And the results are amazing. They take their books, they take their binders, they don't use screens, okay? And they sit in a park, they sit under a roof in a park, and they're out on the jungle gym. And it is the craziest thing. You see pictures of it and they're just hanging all over. The story that they said is, we didn't take, they didn't remove the bad things from school. They removed the kid from the school, and they removed the four walls is what they removed. And the results are amazing. They work with horses. They learn to assert themselves with horses. They learn to manage anxiety. They're very, no bullying is allowed. Oh, interestingly, another part of the school is manners. And Dr. Richardson found if you have excellent manners, you cannot bully.
That's true.
Very interesting. So he has reinstated the manners. These are little gentlemen. He calls them his heroes, and they all have their cool, hero name. They're, all DC Comics names, and they have a blast. And the results academically are amazing. They do science out in the wild, right? And they dissect things out in the wild, and it's just really, really fun. And the motivation is to do their personal best. If you hear some of those testimonials on their Facebook page, it just brings tears to your eyes. These mothers that have said, my son was so angry, he was so anxious, he was hitting, he was, tearing his hair out and everything. And now he's a happy kid, he's a leader. And it's because instead of basing it on standards, they base their progress on their personal record. And they say, what's your personal record for that? Can you do better? Yeah, I can. And the reason it works is not because of a standard written on some wall. It's because of the attachment with that teacher. They will do anything for that teacher because they care about that teacher. The ratio is about 10-1. It's incredible. And they love each other. Those boys love each other. They root for each other. They don't sabotage each other. It's a completely different feeling than walking into the government confinement schooling where you're pitted and competing against each other or competing against an arbitrary standard, which may not work for you at all, right? So it's really exciting. They go to businesses, and they go to farms, and they go to rec centers, and they do have a day a week that they have in a room in a school, and they do some learning there in that room. But it's all formatted as, hey, as soon as you're done, let's go out and run around. Yeah. And they do bike rides and hiking and fishing and swimming, and it's the ultimate Huckleberry Finn school. And it's really fun.
Wow. So you and your husband, you homeschooled your 7 children, correct?
Part-time, about half-time.
Half-time, yeah. And you also said that you encourage them to develop some musical skills, athletic skills, entrepreneurial skills, kind of taught them how the real world works, along, sure, of course, with academics. And it said most of your kids have a small business, and they did, yes, that as teenagers, and they learned how, right, to run a small business. They are successful entrepreneurs as adults, and there's not one of them that's in a cubicle in front of a computer right now. They're all entrepreneurial, yes, doing their own thing.
They are. It's fantastic. I've got a son that's a classically trained violinist. He was a prodigy, and he's a YouTube star. He has 3 million viewers, and he does crazy cosplay violin stuff. So fun. He's making a great living. He's got 4 girls. And I've got another daughter that went to fine art school on both coasts. She became like a Renaissance artist, very, very classical. And she started her own early phonics readers. And it's called Dash into Learning. And I helped her with it, actually. And she sold them all over the world, to schools all over the world, homeschoolers all over the world, because they're darling, they're beautiful, they're not ugly. Like a lot of readers, emphasize sad, mad, and bad. Ugh. But these are beautiful, they're charming, and kids and parents love them. And then now we're doing a social and emotional learning course. It's called Dash into Happy, and that I'm actually writing that and doing that program. And it's completely different than the social emotional learning that you get in schools, because that one wants them to detach from their parents, okay, and start working with their peers and just trying to solve things on their own. But Dash into Happy is about attaching to your parents, learning to soothe, learning to comfort, learning to receive comfort, and to be very, instead of mindful as much, heartful, and talk about feelings and really communicate and attach. Because like I said, if parents and kids attach, the rest of it kind of falls into place.
And it sounds like you're also doing something Bubba and I've talked about. It seems to be more real world, hands on stuff. Let's go see how a business runs. Let's go see how a farm operates. Let's learn some skills that could also be used in the real world, as opposed to, like, we can't believe that schools don't seem to teach a child about a budget. They don't teach a child about how to balance finances. Yeah. They don't learn any of this stuff that's going to be required. Yeah, the things that everybody has to do.
Right. Well, in fact, in Breakout School, they have a tool users program, and if you learn to use a tool, then you get it in your toolkit. And the really fun thing is that the last two tools they get are a Bowie knife and a hatchet. And they've got one boy that walks around with two Bowie knives hanging from his belt. And there's absolute trust there. This guy has absolute perfect track record. And that's very much like how it used to be. You trust kids to step up if you treat them with respect and you expect them to, progress. And people just can't believe it. These were kids that before were really, really impulsive, really, really tend to be not violent, but, just kind of struggling. And now they're just on it. It's so fun.
So we have parents, we've got about 2 minutes left. We have parents that are watching this or listening to this right now. Some people like us, our children are already adults. So they're out and there's some things that we did that we think, hey, that was good. And there's probably some things that we did. If I had to do it over again, I might do it differently. But for those that have children that are either small or, elementary school, or, they're just starting this journey, what's the best advice you give them about the education of their child?
Keep them home with you as long as possible. Get them to attach to you as strongly as possible. And that's the number one thing. Everything else is frosting on the cake. So that's what I would do. If you are both mom and dad working full-time jobs, do everything you can to figure out a way to keep them home with you more and to be there for them. If that means having grandma help out, and that would be my number one thing. It's family.
Right. So you're saying what you want to do there is let the people who will be teaching them be accents in their life, coming in and solidifying and supporting what you are already teaching them. Don't take all the teaching and just kind of contract that out to somebody else.
That's how it always was.
Yeah.
That's how it always was, and you're exactly right.
So a couple of websites you want to look at if you want to find out more some of the things we talked about. BreakoutSchool.org, you can look at that. DashingToLearning.com, that's there. DashingIntoHappy.com. Is that there?
Dash into learning and dashintohappy.com.
Right, I got you right there. Now and we'll put all that there, and you can grab that. Joan, thank you for taking time to be with us. I think this Common Core situation with our country, it almost feels like a monster that we've already let out of the cage. But each individual state, I guess, will have a say in whether they want to continue that, right?
Well, and don't forget, each individual family has a say too. Yeah. And don't give away your power. That's where your power is, right? But absolutely. If there's any bill to repeal it, go for it, support it for sure. Hey, you guys have been wonderful. If we had more people like you in the media, there would be a lot more hope. Good for you.
Well, we think the same thing.
I'm glad you said
Funny
that.
you mentioned
it.
Yeah,
I mean, for you to say that, and that's why this is called Rick and Bubba University. I think this is another place. What we do is we hand out degrees in common sense, which now has become a superpower. But I think a lot of what you've talked about today still is in that same genre of just common sense that at one time Americans seemed to all agree on.
Right. Absolutely. And they're foundational. The humans have not changed that much. And if we get back to what worked for hundreds of years, I think we're actually going to do well.
Makes a lot of sense. Joan, thank you for being with us. Joan Landis, our guest, again, breakoutschool.org, dashingintolearning.com, and dashingintohappy.com as well. Joan, thanks for taking time to be with us.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for joining us on this edition of Rick and Bubba University, the podcast.